Hello everyone, welcome back to this video series on SDTM programming for clinical SAS programmers. In this video, we will see how to create drug accountability datasets. So here the information is collected in terms of dispensed capsules and returned capsules. So we have here on the screen the form that is used to capture the information. The first question we have is the bottle identifier, and the second one is date capsules written and the number of capsules dispensed, and dispensing unit in terms of number of capsules, and date capsules written, number of capsules written, and return unit. So one thing to note here is that the capsules would be dispensed at a particular visit and the return information is captured at a subsequent visit. So the link would be our bottle identifier basically. So here at a particular visit when dispensed, so the information would be filled for dispensing information. At the subsequent visit when the subject comes to return, so we will be filling the information for this return sections and then note the information into the fields. Now let's see the SDTM annotations for this form. So here if we see, these are the raw variable names, so which means the raw dataset variable names which is used to capture the information for the specific question. So for example, this variable called disp_amt underscore da_dat is used to capture the information for date capsules dispensed. So let us now see the SDTM annotations for this form. So let us toggle the annotation. So we are capturing this information of bottle identifier in a variable called da_ref_id of SDTM da dataset. And then next we have date capsules dispensed. So this information is going into a row where da_testcd is equal to disp amount into the variable called da_dtc. So basically what is happening is, so DA is a findings dataset in which we have one record per test. So what we do is the dispensing related information is considered as a test and the return information is collected as a second test. So we are populating the dispensed amount date into the variable called da_dtc when da_testcd is equal to disp amount, and then number of capsules dispensed is stored in a variable called daorres when da_testcd is equal to disp amount. And then let's see the next variable. So the dispensing unit is captured in a variable called daorresu for da_testcd is equal to disp amount. Now let's see the annotations for other variables as well. So here if we see, date capsules returned is stored in the variable called da_dtc, but on the, I think the annotation should have been ret amount here, da_testcd is equal to return amount. So let us now, this should have been returned amount. I'll try to correct it in the source when uploading it to the website. So number of capsules written is again stored in a variable called daorres, but on the record when da_testcd is equal to returned amount. So similarly, return unit is stored in a variable called daorresu when da_testcd is equal to return amount. So we have seen the raw variable names and we have also seen the SDTM annotations on to understand which variables and which rows have to be created and which information has to go into which variables. Now let us see the SAS programming for this lesson. So here on the left hand side I have the SAS program that is being used to create the DA dataset for this lesson, and then on the right hand side I have my intermediate datasets that are getting created from this program. So here the input dataset is our SDTM demographics dataset. In order to create Epoch variable we need subject elements dataset, we have it here, and then the drug accountability form related dataset, it is having a name of DRUG-ACC, so short form for drug accountability. So we have a question for each of the, a variable for each of the questions captured on the case report form. So now let us go to the programming. So here on the left hand side I have defined a macro variable called root2 using another macro variable called root. So this is where I store my input data and all the lesson programs. So for this lesson, so I have my data, the code that creates the input data for this lesson in a file called SDTM DA L101 with all the prior path with the suffix of underscore data dot SAS. So what I'm doing here is that I am running the code present in this SAS program called data underscore SAS underscore data dot SAS in this program, so that all the input data sets are available within this SAS session. So, and then we are jumping into the derivation of our data set. So here if we see, we are creating variables which are directly based on raw data. So we are creating a data set called DA01 by using drug accountability. So before that, I forgot to explain the specification. Let's go to the specification first and then see. So we have seen as part of the annotation description that we are basically creating two different tests. One is disp amount and the second one is returned amount. So from the form drug accountability. So we have separate column given for these two test CDs. So for the ones which are applicable to both the test CDs, the comment is provided in the general comment section. So for study ID, we are being asked to set it to myCSG, and for domain, we are being asked to set it to DA. For useSubject, we are being asked to use the values of study ID and subject from the dataset and concatenate those two with a hyphen in between. And for DA-seq, we are being asked to sort the records based on subject DA ref ID, test CD, and DA DTC, and assign one on the first record of the subject and increment by one on the subsequent records of that subject. And for DA ref ID, so for both the tests, we are being asked to use the value from ref ID variable. Similarly, for DA SPID, we are being asked to use the value from record position, but convert it into 3-character wide string and append leading zeros when the overall width of the value present in record position is less than 3. So for example, if we have a value of 1 in record position, we would have to translate it to 001. And similarly, if we have a value of 20, so we would have to translate it into 020. The overall width has to be 3 characters, and if it is less than 3, we'll have to pad it with leading zeros. So the derivation is the same for both the test CDs of dispensing amount and returned amount. So for DA test CD, the derivation is provided as create a record for dispensed amount, and on that record we are being asked to populate or assign the text disp amount DISP for DA test CD. Similarly, for returned amount, we are using a test CD of RET AMT. So for DA test value, we are being asked to assign the text of dispensed amount for when test CD is equal to disp amount, and for returned amount, we are populating it as returned amount, the full text. And then for DA ORRES, as we have seen in the annotation, for disp amount, we were asked to use the variable DASP AMT from drug accountability dataset. And similarly, for returned amount, RET AMT will be used. So we also had separate variables for units for dispensing and returned amount. So we are using those two variables to populate DA ORRES. As the collected units and the standard results are the same, we are being asked to populate DASTRESC using DAORRES. And similarly, for numeric result, we are just being asked to convert the standard result character to numeric when the result is convertible. And then for standard result unit, we are again asked to populate it with the value equivalent from SDTM DA or RESU, as the original unit and the standard unit is the same. And for DA stat, we are being asked to populate as not done when drug accountability disp amount is not null when creating the row for disp amount. And similarly, if the returned amount is null for any reason in the collected form, so we are being asked to set it to not done in DA stat variable. For visit number and visit, we are being asked to use the folder seek variable and folder name variable respectively. For epoch, so we are being asked to compare, so this should have been DA-DTC, and compare DA-DTC with the SC-ST-DTC and SC-EN-DTC of different epochs for that subject, and populate as treatment when the record falls on the boundary of screening and treatment elements. Populate as treatment when the record falls on the boundary of treatment and follow-up. So we'll see that in programming how this is achieved. And then for DA-DTC, we have seen that there were two different variables, one for capturing the a dispensing date and the second one for returned amount. So when creating the row for disp amount, so we are being asked to use this DISP AMT DA DAT, and when creating the row for DA returned amount. So we are being asked to use the variable called ret amount DADAT, and then we create the DADY variable, which is the study day variable. So as per the standard expectation. So now let us move to the programming. So here we are using drug accountability dataset as input and creating a variable dataset called DA01. So in this we are first creating the variable called study ID, and we were asked to assign the text myCSG for this one. So we are assigning that, and for domain variable we are assigning the abbreviation DA, which is for short form for drug accountability, into this variable. And then for use ID we were asked to concatenate the values present in study ID and subject with a hyphen in between. So we are achieving that by making use of catx function. So the syntax for catx function is the delimiter for and the followed by the list of variables. So this effectively achieves the required logic, that was to concatenate a hyphen between study ID and subject for creating use ID. And then for DASPID variable, so we were asked to use the value from record position but append it with or concatenate leading zeros where applicable. So for that can be achieved by using put function with Z3 format. So what does this Z3 format does is, so overall it returns a string of 3 characters wide. So but if the integer portion on that particular input value is less than 3 characters, it pads it with leading zeros. So the Z stands for 0, and this 3 dot is the overall width expected. So if we wanted a 4 character wide string and append it as leading zeros when it is less than 4 characters, so we would use Z4 dot. So, and for DAREFID, so we were asked to use the value from REFID variable, so we are doing that. So here comes our core logic now. So as we were expected to create 2 records from each input record, so we need 2 output statements. So let's see the program. So here if we see, we have one output statement here and the second output statement here. So, and before outputting a record, we have to make sure that we are creating or assigning the required values for all the desired variables. So each record contributes to 2 tests. So one corresponding to dispensing amount and the second one corresponding to returned amount. So we are making use of the explicit output statements within data step to create that. So first output statement is being used to create the test CD of disp amount. So as we are creating the entry or the result to capture the dispensing amount, we are assigning the value of DA test CD as DASP AMT, and then we are assigning the specified test value for DISP AMT. And then we are for DADTC, we were asked to use DISP AMT variable. So we are using as we are creating dispensing amount row here with this first output statement, so we are using the relevant date variable which was used to capture the dispensing date. So here we are making use of DASPAMT DAT raw variable. So in the input raw data, so we have the date in the form of date 11 in SAS notation. So we are first converting that into numeric format and then converting it back into character variable, but using YYMMDD 10 dot. So when we also know that when we only have date component present, the SAS format of YYMMDD 10 dot is equivalent to ISO 8601 notation. So we are creating DADTC, and then we were asked to populate DA status not done when dispensing amount is missing. So if on any row, if DISPAMT was missing, so we were asked to populate the DA status not done. So we are doing that here. Otherwise, we are assigning the value from disp amount to DAORRES and unit to DAORRESU. And then we have seen in the specification as the original result and the standard result is the same. So we are assigning the value of DAORRES to DASTRESC. Similarly, we were asked to convert DASTRESC to numeric value wherever it is applicable. So we are achieving that using input function and converting it wherever applicable using best.in format. And then for standard result unit, we are assigning the value which is equivalent to DAORRESU. And then we are writing that record to the output data set. And after writing the output dataset, we are making sure that all the derived variables are set to missing to prevent carrying forward of any of these variables. Because as we are creating a second record from the same input dataset, what happens is, so the PDV is not reset to missing for any of the new variables. So for that we need to explicitly set them to missing, because in SAS the newly created variables are reset to missing only when the next observation is fetched from the input dataset into the PDV. But as the same record is being output twice, so we will have to manually ensure that none of the information is explicitly carried forward onto the next test CD. So here in this case, the next test CD is returned amount. So now as we are creating a row for returned amount, so we are assigning the text of RET AMT for DA test CD, and then assigning the text of returned amount for DA test CD variable. As we are creating returned amount, so for creating DA DTC, we need to use the returned date, which is present in the variable called returned amount. Similar to the previous DA DTC on dispensing amount, we are first converting it into numeric and then converting it back into character using yymmdd10 dot format using put function. And then we are assigning the text of not done to DA stat variable when returned amount is missing. Otherwise, we are assigning the value of returned amount to DA ORR ES, returned amount unit for DA ORR ESU, and DA STRESC is equivalent to DA ORR ES. And then we are converting that to numeric and also creating DA STRESU variables, and then writing the record to the output dataset. Let us now take a quick look at the dataset DA01. So if we take a look at drug accountability, so we have 13 records. So as we are supposed to create 2 records from each of this input dataset, we are expecting 26 records in DA01. So let us see that. So here if we see, we have 26 records. So we should have a record for each of the test CD. So here if we see, these 2 records correspond to the same subject and same dispensing ID. So and then we have a record for dispensed amount, and then immediately after that we have outputted it for returned amount. So on the dispensing amount, so it was 37 capsules dispensed and returned were 11 capsules. So we have restructured the data to create rows from variables. So now let us see the next step. So in the next step, what we are doing here is, so we are fetching RFST DTC from DM. So again, this should have been DA01. So by merging DM dataset to DA01. So what we are doing here is, so we are using DM dataset on the right hand side, and when merging, so we are also keeping only the required variables of USUBJD and RFST DTC using keep is equal to option, and merging these 2 datasets based on the values present in USUBJD, and then creating a record only record for the subjects who are present in both the datasets. And then in order to calculate the study day, what we are doing here is we are converting the reference start date to numeric value and storing it in a variable called RFSTDT. And then similarly for DADTC also we are creating a numeric version and storing it in a variable called DADT. And then when both of them are present, so we are checking that using nmiss function, nmiss of RFSTDT and DADT equal to 0. So the resulting value from nmiss would be 0 only when both of these values are present. Both of the variables have a value present on a particular row. So we can calculate DA dy only when both of them are present. So we are checking that. And then we are creating DA dy using the same notation which we were using in some of the other previous videos. So DADT minus RFSTDT plus whether to add 1 or 0 is handled using this mathematical expression. So if we have to if DADT is on or after reference start date, we will have to add 1. So this condition would get evaluated to true only when DADT is greater than RFSTDT. Otherwise, it would get resulting to 0. So that addition of 1 when on or after is condition is met is handled with a mathematical expression. And then in the next step, we are creating our epoch variable. So let's take a look at the SC dataset first and then try to see what is happening. So here, if we see, uh, the epoch variable is present here. Where is it? Yeah. So I am creating a temporary variable called short by extracting the first letter from the epoch variable. So it would be S for screening, T for treatment, and F for follow-up. And in the next step, what I am doing is, so I am creating one record per subject with the start date, but when transposing I am making sure that those epoch starts are indicated with the value of S because I am transposing SCSTDTC. So I'll first show the epoch start dataset and then try to explain this proc transpose step. So I want to create here, if we see in the original SE, so we have one record per subject per epoch, as this study has three epochs. So at the max we are expected to have three records per subject. So let us take a look at epoch start dataset. So here I want to create one record per subject but three variables, one for capturing the start of screening, start of treatment, and start of follow-up. And similarly I want to create a dataset to store the end date for screening, end date for treatment, and end date for follow-up. As original SC has the structure of one record per epoch, I want to translate that into one record per subject but have those three dates available as variables, for one set of variables for start and one set of variables for end. So start variables are stored in a dataset called epoch start, and the end date variables I want to store in a dataset called epoch end. And then in the next step I want to bring the start and end dates of each element for the subject into single dataset called epoch dates. So here if we see, the start date of screening, start date of treatment, start date of follow-up, end date of screening, end date of treatment, and end date of follow-up are all fetched into single dataset. So we will now see that we are achieving that using this section of the code. So we will now see how that is being done. So here in the first step I am using my SE02 dataset and then creating epoch start and dropping all the temporary variables that get created, and we are by using drop is equal to dataset option. So in the newly created variables I am using a prefix of S. S stands for start here. So we are specifying useID and the by statement, and then the variable that we want to transpose is the start date. And then in the ID statement I have used the values short. So we have seen that the value in short would be, so S for screening, T for treatment, and F for follow-up. So the newly created variables would be named as SS, ST, and SF. So that's what was happening here. So we were creating one record per subject with the start dates and three variables, one for screening, one for treatment, and one for follow-up. Similarly, in the next transpose step, what we have done is we have transposed the end date, and then here we are using the prefix option to indicate that the variable names should have the combination of E versus the value present in short. So if we take a look at the epoch end here, so it is ES, ET, and EF, and we will be merging these two datasets in the next step to create a dataset called epoch date, so that start and end dates of all the three epochs, screening, treatment, and follow-up, are present in a single dataset. So in the subsequent step we would be using this dataset to compare where exactly the DA/DTC is falling in between, whether it is in between the start and end of screening, or start and end of treatment, or start and end of follow-up, and then assign the epoch value accordingly. So in the next step what we are doing is we are bringing the or joining our epoch dates to our raw the processed disposition dataset where we have our DA/DTC derived. So here we are assigning the here in this next step we are actually assigning the epoch variable. So we are temporarily creating a variable called YMD by from the values of DA/DTC variable. So here we are checking whether the YMD is in between, whether screening start is less than or is equal to YMD and less than end of screening date, or whether the subject start of treatment is missing, and missing less than start of treatment less than or is equal to YMD less than or is equal to end of screening. So in that case, so we are assigning the value of screening to the epoch variable. So in the next statement, what we are doing here is, so we are checking whether the start of treatment is less than or is equal to YMD less than or is equal to end of treatment. So we are assigning the text treatment to the epoch variable. And in the next step, what we are doing is we are checking whether the start of follow-up is less than YMD, less than or is equal to end of follow-up. If that is the case, so we are assigning the text follow-up to the epoch variable. So what are we doing in the next step here is, so we are creating our sequence variable. So we are sorting the records based on use of JD, DARFID, DATSCD, and DTC. And then here we are making use of some statement to create DASEQ variable. So on the first record of each subject, we are assigning the value of 1 to DASEQ variable. On the subsequent records, so we are incrementing it by 1. And in the next step, we are keeping only the required variables. So let us take a look at the final data set that is getting created. So here we have all the variables derived, and including the study day and also the DASEQ variable here if we see. So we have 4 records for this first subject. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So we were supposed to assign the value of 1 on the first record and increment it by 1 on the subsequent record. So 1 plus 1, 2 plus 1, 2, which will become 3. 3 plus 1 is supposed to be 4. And then for the rest of the cases. So this is how we can create SDTM DA dataset. Thank you for watching and keep learning.